So, before we get into this video, guys, I want to thank Laryngitis for helping me out. No, I'm just kidding. But guys, if you could please leave a like, leave a comment right now. Anything, doesn't matter. It really helps for the algorithm's sake. And before we move on, I just want to say thank you guys for being so patient. Anyway, guys, we're moving on to the stories. Love you. Leave a like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps, like I said. Here's a nightmare I had one night. It's very scary, so brace yourself. One night in the cold, harsh winter of the snow belt in Cleveland, Ohio, I was making my tea, awaiting until it was done steeping. As I finished watching my nightly program, I slowly limped to my cold, damp room. Hence, my heating ducts aren't very good, and my room is on the complete opposite side of my house, away from my furnace, and on the outskirts of the other bedrooms. As I arrived in my room, I turned on a portable heater, let my Harrier dog in, and limped over to my bed, and crawled under the blankets and flannel sheets. It was a freezing night, and my bed was freezing. As I went half asleep, I remember my mother walking in and turning off my heater. After that, I was completely emboweled in the satisfying darkness of slumber. I was sound asleep, and not to be disturbed until my own cries of horror awakens me. As I sit watching TV, too vague to tell what program it was, I was merely amused watching it. Lesser the fact that it seemed that there was no screen that I could make out. I zoned everything out. As my mother walks into the kitchen from my long outstretched foyer. The foyer seemed like it was 50 feet long. A great chandelier hanging from the sky. Expensive wall murals. And a marble floor, which was mixed in with red. She greets me with a mere kiss on the cheek. In a brief conversation, she persuaded me into my dining room, which was empty with beige carpeting, white walls, and a chandelier on the ceiling. She leads me to a window, where we look out into the unknown. As we stare into the forest, we notice nightfall is soon to come, and it is just past dusk. The clouds look like they are about to have a long blizzard. As we scan down the sky, I notice that there's already an inch of snow on the ground. The trees were all leafless, and they looked dead because it was that time of the season. As we just stare into the edge of our land and into the rest of the deep weald, we notice how gothically beautiful it looks. Just then, we notice a slight change in the landscape. We see deer scattering about, especially away from a certain side of the timberland. Just then, we hear a blood-curdling scream. The scream you hear when somebody is in excruciating pain and agony. It lasts for about 5 seconds and dies out. I tremble in my dream, even though it does not seem like it. I look at my mother, and she does not make a sound. We stare into the unknown. We look into the woodlot and hear the cry for help again, and it ceases after 5 seconds, then recites. Finally, she grabs my arms and takes me to my room. We sit in there and keep getting these haunting phone calls of a man screaming, "You're next, you're next." She solemnly hangs up and has a trace of fear across her face. Suddenly, the scream is much closer to my bedroom window. Suddenly, I awaken with a jolt. I feel a cold sweat run down my back and notice that my breath shows up in midair. My furry little friend is in a little ball next to me, which means it was too cold for him too. I'm too afraid to fall back into sedation, so I stay awake and stay alert to any little noise in the home. As the clock turns 6 a.m., I wake up and wander into life before dawn. Everything is dark and I can't see, so I turn on the television. I make a cup of morning tea and tremble as I drink it. As I walked out to the bus, I couldn't help hearing the screams in my head and being terrified walking down a 50-foot driveway surrounded by timber. I've had a few experiences as a child, probably being less than 8 years of age, give or take. I found some little glass thing that I liked, and I was playing with it. I don't know what I was fascinated about it with, but I was a child. I lost it, and I woke up that night to go to the bathroom, and there it was on the bathroom counter. I didn't know how it had gotten there. I walk out in the hallway to go back to bed, and I see a figure run into my room. I run into my room, looking under my closet, under my bed, and all over. I find nothing. I go into my brother's room. He's still asleep, and see nothing else. I suppose the figure was returning the object to me. Who knows? Another time, I guess I woke up my mother to get me something to drink. After we went down the stairs and turned a corner to go to the kitchen, I'm behind her, and as she is about to go to the other room, I see a little boy, probably about my age at the time, and dressed in old-style clothes. I don't know, maybe 17th or 18th century clothes, just old. I asked my mother if she just saw that, and she said, "No, Bradley. What did you see?" I told her what I had just seen, and she didn't tell me it was my imagination or anything. She believed me. She says that many people in the family have seen things from time to time like that. I've seen other things in those days. My memory is a little shady about them, but those are my two best remembered. For some reason, I was somewhat scared of what I saw. I don't know why. Maybe because they were so sudden and gone so quickly. I would only see them for about 2 or 3 seconds, and they would just disappear as quickly as they appeared. I did live across the street from a cemetery, and someone we sold something to at a garage sale said the plot of land we lived on used to be a cemetery. An old one, judging by the clothes the boy was wearing. An old girlfriend sent me a link to this site, and I thought I would check it out. I came across the link, Children and Ghosts, and I thought I would give you my thoughts after reading it. I stopped seeing these things when I guess I just got a little scared, and just said to myself, I don't want to see these things anymore. After that, I hadn't seen a thing. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I'm not sure if I wouldn't mind seeing anything these days. I worked at a funeral home for 6 months, and saw a lot of sadness, and some gruesome things as well. People seem to be most upset when someone takes their own life, more so than a murder even. I got out of that because there is no money in it. It is because of those experiences that I do believe in life after death. Well, I hope I didn't make this message too long. I hope what I told you was helpful to you in some way. Well, let me first explain. I'm not psychic. I don't think that I'm particularly sensitive. I know that some of my friends and I in high school did mess around with some stuff. Ouija boards, going to cemeteries, etc. That wasn't the brightest of ideas, but it wasn't meant to be harmful. For whatever reason, I seemed to attract this kind of energy. My parents had bought a house in a brand new development in West Windsor, New Jersey, in 1992. It was built on a former sod farm. Nothing too strange that we knew about. From the very beginning, I'd gotten weird vibes and sensations there that something just wasn't right. My grandmother's sister, who was very sensitive, did not like coming over, that she never felt comfortable there. I never saw anything outright when I lived there, but I always got some strange vibes. My late grandmother did have a frightening experience. She had fallen asleep watching TV in the family room and awoke around 2 a.m. to two men standing in front of her. She screamed, and they were gone. I would get sensations of cold spots in certain spots in the home, especially in the front room. A lot of misery befell my family when they lived there too. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe not. In 1994, I lived for a brief time at 50 Main Street in Roebling. It was once a doctor's office, and I believe a post office at one point in time. I had many strange experiences in that home. My husband was going to school at night and worked full-time, so I was there by myself a lot. There was a room that was used for storage between our kitchen and the garage. I never wanted to be in there by myself. It was a very oppressive feeling, and I had a hard time breathing when I would be in there. There had been several times when I was doing laundry in the basement that I felt as if someone was standing behind me. Every so often I would catch a glimpse of an older, heavy-set woman outside. Since there was an alley directly behind the house, I assumed it was a neighbor. Apparently, no one alive in the neighborhood fit the description. The one thing that did me in was the third floor. When my husband lived there as a teenager, he and his brother shared it, and his brother had put mirrors along one whole wall. For whatever reason, I was never able to look at those mirrors. I don't know if I was afraid of what I'd see or what, but I never could. I had originally planned on making the other room there into my sewing room. One afternoon, I was up sweeping when I felt as if someone was in the room with me. I knew I was home alone. It was such a palatable presence. I started to pray out loud. I basically did the rosary, but the feeling did not subside. I did not feel evil. It was just very oppressive. Needless to say, I was grateful when my mother-in-law sold the home and we had to move. As an aside, I grew up in Ridgewood, Bergen County, and I think that it is a one haunted town. There is something very evil in the cemetery across from Ben Franklin Jr., and I knew people would mess around with that stuff that they should have not stirred something up there. One night, we were all hanging out across the street by Ben Franklin Jr., and then I went home. I parked in my parents' garage. I was 17 or 18 at the time, and for some strange reason, the car backed itself out of the garage and landed directly over a ditch. It was like it had perfectly aligned itself to go there. The high school is haunted too. There used to be a room off the auditorium in the tower that was always 10 degrees cooler than anywhere else in the school. Of course, this is where we would go to smoke on a rainy day. There would just be a strange feeling in there. I don't know of any stories behind the building. It just might be a natural energy field or something. Finally, I used to work at the Borders in West Windsor. The shopping center that the store is located in was built over swampland where a bunch of kids from Trenton had drowned on Christmas night when they were fleeing police in a stolen car. The accident happened around 10 p.m. at night. Apparently, where the back room in the store is was not too far away from the accident where it happened. There were many times we would hear things outside at night on the loading dock. Of course, when we would open the door, there would be nothing. A lot of times, and especially after 10 p.m., it would be very creepy going back there. I know that some other employees said that they had seen things back there. I never saw anything. I just got weird feelings. I've never really shared any of these stories with anyone before, but I feel like you guys won't do anything to exploit them or make fun of me. When I was 15 years old, I used to frequently babysit from a next door neighbor who has 5 children. It was a Friday night at about 10 p.m. I had just put the children to sleep in their bedrooms upstairs. I stayed up for a while watching a few late night shows. At about midnight, I found myself restless and decided to wash the dishes from that evening's dinner. About 10 minutes into washing, I heard footsteps behind me. Without turning around, I said, "You're supposed to be sleeping." I received no response and turned slightly to my right, and out of the corner of my eye, I seen the outline of a little boy with dark hair, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, and white tennis shoes. I turned back to the dishes and was about to repeat myself when the hair on the back of my neck started to go up and a shiver went down my back. I quickly realized that the little boy I had just seen was not one of the children. I turned completely about to find nobody there. I quickly walked through the kitchen to the living room and up the stairs, where I found all the children sleeping soundly in their beds. There is no way that any of the children could have ran back up the stairs and back into their beds within 5 seconds, and also without me hearing anything. My proof of what I had seen was real, is that all of the children were wearing pajamas, and not one of them had on shorts. Well, this didn't exactly happen to me, but it happened to my grandmother and her mother in the 40s in Brazil. My grandmother was young, and she had just bought her first house with my grandfather, and she had 2 little daughters. My aunts, obviously. My father wasn't even born yet. My grandmother isn't a person to lie, so this story is no bull. Well, it was around 1945, and my grandmother was preparing food in the kitchen for my aunts. My grandfather was at work, so she was alone with her 2 daughters. She heard footsteps coming down the living room and down the hall. She thought that was strange because my grandfather wouldn't come home. Only 5 hours later, she went to greet him, but instead was greeted by a terrible cold gust of wind. She shrugged it off and went on with her life. But until the next day, she was cooking for my 2 aunts. My oldest aunt was around 5, and the second was around 2. She heard the same footsteps, and she noticed that it was always at the end of her mother's room. My great-grandmother would sleep there sometimes. She grabbed her 2 daughters and waited outside for my grandfather to come. This would always happen at lunchtime, around 12 p.m. Well, my grandfather was always skeptical when it came to ghosts, so he comforted her and told her he was hearing things. She believed him and went on. The next day, my great-grandfather went to sleep there. She would sleep there to help out my grandmother with the girls, and the footsteps still came, but my grandmother felt safe because she was with her mother and 2 2 daughters, so she didn't mind it. At night, my great-grandmother was sleeping, and she felt the bed go down, as if someone was sitting down on it. Then, she felt a hand caressing her face. She got the heck out of there, and never returned to that house. They lived there for 2 years. Soon after my father was born, they moved. So that's my story. I do not believe she was lying, because she isn't a person to lie about that. Thank you.